Hello! All right, today we're going to be doing more two-step equations. So they're a little bit different today. They're just going to look like something like distributive property, but we don't have to do it. So it's actually kind of fun. So like again, I love doing equations, so let's go ahead and get started. So remember, when you're solving equations, you're going to do the opposite or the inverse operation that it's showing you. So if it's telling you that it's being multiplied by 3, what's the inverse, or how do you undo it? The opposite would be to divide by 3. Okay? The opposite of dividing by -5 would be to multiply by -5. Okay? It's just the operations that you are undoing or doing the opposite, not the integers, okay? The opposite of adding 7 would be subtracting 7. And then the opposite of subtracting 9 is adding 9. To use the properties of equality, I have to solve this problem here where it has 3 times the quantity x plus 5 equals 45. So for step 1, I see that it's times 3 through the whole thing. This is only because the whole problem, like right here, x plus 5, the whole quantity, okay? So I have to divide by 3 on this side, and that will cancel this out, and then I can divide by 3 here. So when I do that, it becomes x plus 5 equals 15. These cancel out, the 3's cancel out, that's a giant 1, so I'm just left with this part here. So 45 divided by 3 is 15. So when I get to this part, then you're just at the one-step equation, right? So this is adding 5, so instead of adding 5, we're going to subtract 5. So 15 minus 5 is 10, and so my solution is x equals 10. So let's go on to the next problem. So now I need to solve this 5 times the quantity n minus 2 equals -30. So the first step that I'm going to do is I can see that I can divide by 5 here because this is the factor of 5, okay? Has a factor of 5. So I'm going to go ahead and divide the left side by 5. So if I divide the left side of the equation by 5, I have to divide by 5 on the right side. So I'm going to divide by 5 on the right side. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So I'm going to be left with n minus 2 equals, and then -30 divided by 5 is a -6. Now I'm to the one-step equation. So I have n minus 2. So the opposite of subtracting 2 would be adding 2. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I get n equals, and then -6 plus 2, since they're opposite signs, I like to subtract in my head. So 6 minus 2 is 4. I have more negatives, so my answer is going to be -4. Okay, let's go on to the next problem here. So I see 2 times the quantity x plus 4 equals 20. So I'm going to start here. Since I can divide this by 2, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to divide the whole thing by 2. This is a giant 1, so I'm left with this here. These 2 canceled out. We wanted to get rid of that. So I have x plus 4 equals, and then 20 divided by 2 is 10. Now I'm at my one step. So I have x plus 4. So what's the opposite of adding 4? It'd be subtracting 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides of the equal sign. I do not subtract under the variable. I try to line up all my like terms together. So, and if I subtracted 4, then I wouldn't be getting anywhere, and I'd be changing the problem. You can only do the same thing one time to each side. Okay, so this would be x equals, and then 10 minus 4 is 6. Okay, let's go on to the next problem. Here's our next problem. So I see that I have 2/3 now on the outside of this quantity n plus 6. So I'm going to do the opposite. So it's like dividing by 2/3, but when you divide by a fraction, really you're multiplying by the reciprocal to get rid of it, right? So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to rewrite my equation first. And then I'm going to undo this 2/3 to get rid of it. So I'm going to multiply by 3 halves. This will cancel each other out, okay, and give me 1 whole. And then I'm going to multiply by 3 halves here. Okay. So this cancels each other out. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and then 2 divided by 2 is 1. So I'm left with the same thing in here, so n plus 6 equals, and then I'm going to go ahead and just multiply straight across. You can say that that's 1 here. Or you can do 10 divided by 2, which is 5, and then times 3. But I'm going to go ahead and do 10 times 3 is 30. And then 1 times 2 is 2. So 30 divided by 2 is 15. I still have this n plus 6. Okay. So this was the 1 step. The 2 step is the second step is now I need to subtract the 6 on both sides. So then I get the 6's cancel out, so then I get n equals, and then 15 minus 6 is 9. Okay. So this is your first step. I normally would change this to a 15 automatically, because I would do this. I would go 10 divided by 2 is 5, and then 5 times 3 is 15, and I'd write the 15 here instead of doing this line here. Okay? All right, let's go on to the next problem. Okay, so here we can see that we have a decimal now, and then we have a fraction over here. Okay, so we have to get rid of this 0.2. So let's go ahead, and to get rid of the 0.2 is being multiplied by it. So I'm going to divide by 0.2. This will cancel out. I'm left with c minus 3 equals 10 divided by 0.2. Now I don't like decimals when I'm dividing, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply here times 10 over 10. So then I get negative 100 over 2. Well, what's negative 100 divided by 2? That would be negative 50. Okay? It's a little bit easier once you get rid of the decimal, right? Because when you multiply by a factor of 10, you just move the decimal over. And then 10 times 10 is 100. Or a negative 10 times 10 is negative 100. Okay. So I have here c minus 3 equals negative 50. Well, I need to undo this. I need to get the c by itself here, so I'm at the 1-step equation, so I need to, instead of subtracting 3, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I get c equals, and then negative 50 plus 3. So I have some negatives and I have some positives. When my signs are different, I'm going to subtract in my head. So I have 50 minus 3, which is 47. Do I have more negatives or positives? I have more negatives, so it's going to be negative 47. So c equals negative 47. So let's go on to this next problem here. I'm going to rewrite it. I see that I'm multiplying by 1/4, so I need to get a whole, right? So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, or I need 4/4 basically, right? So I'm going to multiply this one by 4/1, and then times 4/1. These would cancel out, so I'm just left with my d minus 3 equals, and then negative 15 times 4. So that would be negative 60. Now I'm at my 1-step solution that I need to solve. So now, since I see subtracting 3, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I get d, just write it right down below, write the equal sign right down below. The 3's cancel it out because they're 0 pairs. And then I have some negatives and positives. So I'm going to subtract in my head. So 60 minus 3 is 57. Do I have more negatives or positives? I have more negatives, so it would be a negative 57. So Jamal and two cousins received the same amount of money to go to a movie. Each boy spent $15. Afterwards, the boys had $30 altogether. Write and solve an equation to find the amount of money each boy received. So what is the variable going to be stand for? I'm going to do M is going to be equal to the money or the amount each boy received. I can never spell received. Oops. Is that right? I hope so. Yeah. All right. So now I need to do, so how many people are there? It says Jamal and his two cousins. So there's 3 people. And they received the same amount. So 3 times however much amount, right? But they spent $15, and at the end they had all together $30. So I'm going to start with how much each boy spent. So if I'm talking about how much one person received, right? So they received, I don't know, say $20, right? And then that person spent 15. You have to take away the 15. So then if they started with $20 and they took away 15, I would be left with $5, right? And then that's saying what did they have left, which would be 30. However, this is for like one person, but we're talking about all 3 people had $30 left over. So that means if I multiply all of this times 3, because they all got the same amount of money, they all spent $15. So if I multiply it by 3, then I would be able to figure out how much money did they receive at the beginning. Okay? So to do this, you divide both sides by 3. It's going to be tight. So I'm going to rewrite it over here. So I have m minus 15 equals, and 30 divided by 3 is 10. And then I have to add 15 to both sides because it's subtracting 15. So I get m equals, the 15s cancel out, and then 25. So each person, or each boy in this case, started with $25. So write and solve the equation to find the amount of money each boy received. I would write each boy received $25. Okay. All right, you guys. I hope you guys are doing well. Bye.